Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the ministry. And today we are talking about Esther and Cinderella. Okay, there is this conscious belief that the story of Cinderella was actually created from the book of Esther because there are so many parallels to the way that the story was written to the way that the biblical story was told. Okay? The story was changed ever so slightly to fit the narrative for Cinderella. But it's believed that it is based off of Cinderella. It is based off of Esther, and potentially Aladdin may also be based off of Cinderella in a male version form, meaning the characters were switched. So, what am I saying? Well, the other night, I got the opportunity to watch Roger and Hammerstein's version of Cinderella with Brandy. And every once in a while, I get a chance to watch it. And it's been like a few years because I used to watch it on my cell phone. I think I watched it about 4 years ago on my cell phone. But it was on television on Tuesday night, and I knew I wanted to watch it. They were doing a review of the story and so on and so forth. But as I watched it, I felt an unction in my spirit to literally write down what was transpiring in the film and bring that to you here on the channel, because as we know, we are in the season of marriages, weddings, so on and so forth. And I don't know, have I done Esther before? I think I have touched on Esther, but I haven't really done a thorough talking about the book of Esther. But as we know, those of us that are in a season of waiting, are two top stories in the Bible are Esther and the book of Ruth. I've done multiple teachings on Ruth and Boaz, but this is specifically a teaching on Esther. And it was brought to my attention when watching the movie to do this in this way. I have been in the process of trying to see whether I want to do a 5-7 day challenge on Cinderella. This is pretty much an introductory to what that would be about if I ended up doing that 5 to 7 day challenge, where I really would go in and do a breakdown of this content in that format. Previously, I did a short video talking about the movie The Invitation, and that actually turned out to be a horror movie. But when you think about it, if you think about it, when it comes down to your family members and it comes down to your generational curses, it can be a spiritual bloodbath when you really do think about it. But for this, we are going to go through the Roger and Hammerstein's Cinderella as a review. Now, as I'm going through, I'm going to bring up points in relation to how it parallels the story of Esther, and how this also reflects where we are in the season that we are in for God ordained marriage. This may be a two-parter, I can almost guarantee it, but we're going to see how it flows. As we start here, the beginning of the film, you see Cinderella, who is walking with her stepsisters and her stepmother. Now, here's your parallel for Cinderella and Esther. Cinderella, both of her parents have died at this point, and she is being cared for by her evil stepmother, okay, who was the wife of her father just before he died. And a lot of different tellings say there was something that was done, he went out, he never came back. When he left, something occurred in his journey, and on his way back, he ended up dying. And she was left with her stepmother. And now in the story of Esther, both of her parents died. We never really find out what exactly occurred, whether it was a famine, the father died going out to find food for the family, and then the mother passed away after her birth, or an incident occurred. We do not know exactly what happened to Esther. I've seen in film versions, they try to give you some type of explanation as to what happened to Esther's mother and father. But she ended up being raised by her uncle. Now, which also shows that she transfer of guardianship to another relative and or family member. This is what they both have in common. Now, in the opening scene, Cinderella is running errands with her stepmother. Now, because she's been with her stepmother for so long, she has a tendency to be very, what's the word I'm looking for? She's very much put in charge of doing everything. The stepmother doesn't want to do anything. The stepmother wants her to do everything for her and her two children. So they pretty much turned her into a servant instead of another child with them. She has become the person that does everything for the household. So, is this a parallel? No. Because Esther, on the other hand, she was raised by the uncle and his wife. In some versions, the uncle lived alone. In some versions, it was the cousin. So, I don't know whether it was the mother's cousin or what have you, that they called the uncle, but she was being raised in this format, and she desired to leave. She had views of what she desired to go off and do and become at the age that she was, and in parallel, Cinderella, she always imagined what life would be if she got the opportunity to be out and about and to have a life outside of what it appeared to be to everyone else, with her being the servant to her sisters. She always wondered what it would be like to dress, to be known, to be affluent, to be everything that her godmother and god sisters positioned themselves as, but really weren't. And they literally were spending up her inheritance. It's basically what they were doing. And she was in a position that she longed to find out what the other side of that life was. On contrary with Esther, she wasn't particularly fond of palace life, but due to what happened to Vashti in the castle that she was completely unaware of, in some versions, like for instance One Night with the King, it was her and her best friend who went into the castle and they saw what happened with Vashti. Otherwise, they didn't really know what was going on. In previous versions, she didn't really understand what had happened. It was probably just okay. In previous versions, she didn't really understand. So, as the story went on, you saw the development of the characters. Now, in Cinderella, what ends up happening is she's out on the court with the family observing something, and the siblings and her stepmother are off doing something, and she's looking at something, and I believe this gentleman, who at this time, if you don't know the story, you do not find out that he is the prince. He is the prince. Here is where I'm going to dig into kingdom marriage here. The prince snuck out of the castle dressed as a commoner because he didn't want any attention. Some of you, follow me, those of you that are preparing for kingdom marriage, your God-ordained spouse is in a situation where his job, his career, maybe he's an accountant, maybe he's a real estate agent, maybe he's an influencer, maybe he's a speaker, maybe he's recognizable, maybe he's what have you. But this particular person does like it when he gets to go out and don't nobody recognize who he is. He loves those moments. He loves those times. Maybe the guy is a celebrity. Who knows? He loves that. Because he wants people to recognize him for who he is, not for what he represents. The status, the celebrity, the influence. He just wants to be that normal guy. So, when he runs into Cinderella, he ends up, as they do the singing mantra of the film, he's talking about how he would treat a woman like a princess. And she's speaking as, well, being a shelter girl, she wants to be treated like a human being. Now, let's flip the script and go back to Esther. Esther, she, if I'm recalling correctly, I don't remember. One of the versions, I believe she and the prince had an interaction before. Matter of fact, I do know for a fact in the version of One Night with the King, which can be found on YouTube, she was sent in to see the king before they got married. And they talked and had a conversation, which he was intrigued by her because of the fact that she was unlike the other women. We're not interested in him for his status or what have you. She sat there and talked and read. She literally read the newspaper to him. And then they ended up talking, and she literally started to tell him scriptures from the Bible in their conversation, or in whatever it was she was using in order to entertain him with the stories. So when the king, prince, what have you, first comes into knowledge of the female, he's intrigued by who she is. Not by her status, not by her appearance, the fact that she's different. He noticed her difference automatically. With that being said, this is the moment in which they met. So, where am I at? They both were looking for the exact same thing. In Cinderella, the prince was looking for someone that he could be himself with. He was looking for the freedom of self-expression. He was looking for the ability of anonymity and the ability to be free within that state of living freely and not feeling like he was forced to follow the rules of what it was that he had chosen for his lifestyle, or that was considered to be his lifestyle. Okay? Now, on the same token, Cinderella was also looking for freedom. Freedom from the oppression of her stepmother. Freedom from the oppression of being a servant to her stepsisters. Freedom of the intimidation and that Jezebelic spirit of control, gaslighting, all of this. It was a freedom there. Now, Esther, on the other hand, she loved Mordecai, her uncle, cousin, I'm not quite sure. She loved him. And she wasn't looking for freedom in any way, shape, or form from him. But what ended up happening is, because of the edict in the city, which I'll get into in a second, because literally it's about to come to that same point in the story of Cinderella, that Cinderella was happy, but she wanted to find her freedom in going in the version from One Night with the King. She was prepared to leave and go to another. She was preparing to go to another village. Preparing to go somewhere. And she was preparing to say her goodbyes that night with her uncle. She was going somewhere specific. But I can't remember. It wasn't Bethlehem. But she was going to go somewhere, which her plans were divinely interrupted, which is kind of funny. I was listening to a minister this morning, all things in alignment, just released a word called divine interruption. A divine interruption is a drastic shift in your plans. Whichever plan that you already had planned out, there was a drastic shift. So, what happens? When he returns back to Cinderella, when the prince returns to the castle, the assistant for the queen immediately comes to him and said, "Where did you go?" And he's explaining, I just want to have some time to myself and be myself. And he's like, "You can't really be doing that." The only people that I can think of that have this kind of strictness in their lifestyle is celebrities. They are the only ones that can't go out and be out like that and doing whatever they want. They have to have the driver, they have to have the butler, they have to have their assistant, they have to have all these people. If they go missing, their people are like, where'd you go and what are you doing? We need to know where you are. What if you have a meeting? What if you have and they're the ones that are like, can I breathe and have a me time moment where I just am myself? Like, really? Just, I don't need all this. Anyway, once he goes in to his parents are having a conversation, pretty much straight to the point. We want heirs. We're not going to be king and queen forever, so we're seeking to help you find a wife. And they're like, we're going to do a ball. Pretty much his mother is forcing him to go to a ball where he will find a wife. And he's like, Mother, I don't want to do this, and so on and so forth. And she's like, I think it's a good idea for us to have a ball. Pretty much, she's forcing it upon him. He has no choice. So they go out into the city, and the assistant announces the ball that is going to be happening at the castle. Going back to Esther, the king has put out an edict saying he is looking for a new queen. Now, in Esther, it's a little bit different, because in Esther, they're bringing all the potentials to the castle. They are not giving now, yes, in Cinderella, they bring all of the potentials to the castle for a ball, but the freedom of the women is under duress in Esther, because they are brought to the castle and are forced to stay at the castle. And I'm going to tell you why. They forced the women to stay at the castle because of the fact that pretty much the way of him trying to figure out which wife is good for him is he has to sleep with each one of them. Once he sleeps with each one of them, they become his wife. And because legally in those customs at that time, once you have sex with the woman, they are your property, pretty much. So he, as he sleeps with each one, he has to continue to care for them. So this is where you run into the different harems and all of this. Unlike in Cinderella, where they were just invited to the castle, they could leave in their own discord. And also, he did not get to meet them. The king did not get to meet these women for the main choosing immediately. They had to go through 12 months of beauty treatments first. And throughout that time, he was interviewing each and every one of them. Meaning he would call an individual one to his chambers at a specific point in time throughout that 12-month period to speak with them, to test them, and to find out, is this someone that I want to be with? So on and so forth. And also the differentiation with Esther is, once he chose who he wanted to be queen, he still had the ability that he could sleep with any of the other ones whenever he felt like it. Meaning, if you aren't the one, I can go off and sleep with whoever else I want to. That's what we see in today's society, where you have celebrities in open marriages. We have regular people that are out here in open marriages. Because the person has the status to, they can go out and sleep with whoever they want. And it's literally, as these celebrities are known to, they'll get married and still have 15 women on the side. And it's for the status that they are in as the celebrity, it's not really a faux pas. They talk about it, but it's not really a faux pas. Whether they married or not, they still got see them hanging out with other women. Now, does that feed for fodder for the gossip magazines? Yeah, of course it does. But biblically, that's not the way that it's supposed to go. Now, where are we at? We're on 25 minutes though. Got about 7 more minutes to go through this. Now, Cinderella is at a point where she knows that she's listening to her stepsisters and her stepmother as they talk about going to this ball. Any woman is eligible to go to this ball. Okay? But they look at her as being common. So they're seeking this position for themselves. More so, the mother is seeking the position for the 2 daughters. She does not consider Cinderella at all as even being an option. But Cinderella is watching what they are doing and how the stepmother is attempting to create and use tactics in order to get the siblings to have whatever, what's the word I'm looking for? To create the persona necessary to stand in the position of a queen. But it's not authentic, and she can see that. And Cinderella makes the point of saying that she believes that falling in love with who they are authentically will be more attractive. But they are laughing because, for one, if you watch the film, they have no brain. The mother is the brain for the 2 of them, and anything the mother says goes. Even if they agree with Cinderella, they gonna still agree with mom because the mom is the one in power. She's got a spirit of Jezebel to Ahab type thing, and I'm pretty sure that's what happened with Cinderella's father. Now, they laugh, and the stepmother reveals that she has had this bitter spot for men most of her life, and about how she lived in the past and how she wants her daughters to take up that same mantle of pretty much attracting a guy, getting him to do what she wants, and getting to live off of that man. And Cinderella does not agree in any way that this is the right way to be. Now, if you look at Esther, in the concept of Esther is seeing the harems and the women and all of this, but she's conversating with the what's his name? He's the concubine. Concubine is the eunuch dude. He's the guy that is pretty much not so much the right hand to the king, but he's the one in charge of the harem. And he's observing the women, and he's observing the process, and she's listening and finding out more information about why she's there. And she has the same opinion that Cinderella has. It should be about authenticity, not about sexuality or the body or what have you. It should be about the brains, so on and so forth. So, as she goes in, now, she gets the opportunity to spend an evening with the prince, which we already discussed. Now, here comes the night of the ball. Cinderella has to watch her siblings and her stepmother prepare to go to the ball. And she asks, the ball is for all the eligible women in the city to come to it. Can I go? Her stepmother, who is a very Jezebelic spirit, says no. No, you cannot go. Why? Why would you want to go? Gaslighting by thereby bringing a mockery. I said this in a previous video. Bring about mockery, using that mockery spirit to mock everything in which she is, that she would ever want to be standing next to the prince. How could she have the ability to even dare to desire to want to stand next to the prince? So, because she keeps calling her common, that she's too simplistic, too what have you, that the prince wouldn't want that, but they don't know the prince. So, going back to Esther, when Esther had her moment with the prince, when she got to be invited into his chambers for that night, one night with the king, she got the ability to sit in his presence. And instead of sleeping with him like most of the others did, she spent the evening speaking to him. Now, this is interesting. I was listening to the apostle I listened to ever so often. He was on this morning. But he said this in a video I listened to a few days back. And he was talking about men. Everybody thinks that men are attracted to a female's body. No, they aren't. And being that this guy is a man, he's saying, no, the man is not attracted to the female's body. He is attracted to her mind. A woman can control a man by what she says. Now, pause. Getting back to Cinderella, that is what the mother was trying to do. Trying to get the daughters to say the right things, to do the right things to attract the prince. Now, in Esther, getting back to Esther and what I'm saying, which I'm going about to get cut off, so I'm going to say this. I'm going to pick up in the next video about what happens next. Alright, next time.